Sarah Chen knelt in the glowing forest and tried not to think about how far she was from Earth. The trees around her pulsed with soft blue light, and the ground beneath her boots sparkled like someone had scattered diamonds across dark soil. She had been on Kepler 442b for 6 months now, and still, the alien beauty of this world made her breath catch. Her collection kit beeped softly as she gathered samples of the luminescent moss that covered the tree roots. This was routine work, but Sarah loved it anyway. Every sample could hold secrets about how life developed on this strange world. The Vryn who lived here were nothing like humans. They looked like living sculptures made of crystal and light, and they moved with careful, deliberate grace. Sarah had learned quickly that the Vryn were cautious about everything, especially contact with other species. The rules were clear: stay 3 meters away at all times, and never, never touch them. Vryn. Their bodies were fragile in ways humans struggle to understand. A handshake could shatter their delicate crystalline structures. Sarah checked her wristcam to make sure it was recording. The small device wrapped around her forearm like a thick bracelet, and it captured everything she saw. Command required all field researchers to wear them, and Sarah had gotten used to the constant red recording light. She moved deeper into the forest zone, following a trail of particularly bright moss. The bioluminescence here was stronger than anywhere else she had surveyed. Something rustled in the undergrowth ahead. Sarah froze, and her hand went to the comm device on her belt. Vryn adults made almost no sound when they moved, but the rustling continued, getting closer. Then she saw it. A small creature emerged from behind a cluster of glowing ferns, and Sarah felt her scientific brain immediately start cataloging details. Roughly the size of a house cat, but its body was covered in soft fur that pulsed with gentle light. Unlike the rigid crystal bodies of adult Vryn, this creature looked organic and warm. Its large eyes fixed on Sarah, and it made a soft chirping sound. Sarah slowly stood up and began backing away. This had to be a Vryn juvenile, and the protocols were even stricter about young ones. She had seen images in the Vryn database, but never encountered one in the field. The cub tilted its head and chirped again. Then it started walking toward her. Sarah kept backing up and raised her hands in what she hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "Hey, little one," she said softly. "You need to stay back." The cub didn't stop. It picked up speed, and its fur began flashing in rapid patterns of blue and yellow. Sarah continued retreating, but her boot caught on a root. She stumbled, and in that moment of imbalance, the cub rushed forward. Happened so fast that Sarah's training couldn't override her instinct. The cub was falling, and without thinking, she reached out to catch it. Small paws grabbed onto her sleeve, and suddenly the cub was climbing up her arm. Sarah stood completely still in shock. The cub clung to the fabric of her jacket and began making urgent chittering sounds. Its tiny claws scratched at the material, and its whole body shook. The bioluminescent patterns on its fur flashed wildly through colors Sarah had never seen in the database. "Oh no," Sarah whispered. "Oh no, no, no. This was a catastrophic protocol breach." The cub wrapped itself tighter around her forearm, right where her wristcam sat recording everything. It seemed desperate, almost frantic in the way it burrowed against the fabric. Sarah wanted to gently remove it, but she was terrified of hurting the fragile creature. Cold. Footsteps. Multiple footsteps. Heavy and fast. 3 adult Vryn burst from the trees and stopped dead when they saw Sarah. Their crystalline bodies went rigid, and the light inside them flickered in what Sarah had learned to recognize as extreme distress. "I didn't mean to," Sarah started, but the largest Vryn raised a limb. "Do not move, human," the Vryn's voice came through the translation device. "Step away from the juvenile immediately." "I can't," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. It's holding on to me, and I don't want to hurt it. The Vryn moved closer, and Sarah could see their bodies trembling. The cub on her arm chittered louder, and burrowed even deeper into her sleeve. Its tiny body was shaking, and the light patterns had turned almost completely blue. "This is a violation of the highest order," another Vryn said. "You have contaminated the juvenile." "I was trying to help," Sarah protested. "It was falling." "Silence," the first Vryn commanded. "You will come with us now, and medical teams will attempt to save the juvenile from your contact." Sarah felt sick. She had ruined everything. 6 months of careful diplomatic progress destroyed in seconds because she couldn't control her instincts. The cub made a small whimpering sound, and Sarah looked down at it. Despite the Vryn's words, the little creature didn't seem hurt. It seemed scared. The Vryn surrounded her and began herding her back toward the research station. Sarah walked carefully, trying not to jostle the cub that still clung desperately to her sleeve. Her wristcam recorded every moment. The walk back felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. Other Vryn appeared along the path, and they all stopped and stared. Some made sounds of distress. Others turned away, as if they couldn't bear to look. When they reached the human research vessel, Perseverance, Sarah's entire team, was waiting at the airlock. Her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, looked pale. "Sarah, what happened?" he asked. "I made contact with a Vryn juvenile," she said quietly. "It was an accident, but—" "There are no accidents in matters of contamination," the lead Vryn interrupted. "The human will be quarantined immediately, and her recording device will be surrendered as evidence." "Evidence of what exactly?" Martinez demanded. "Of a catastrophic breach that may have killed one of our young," the Vryn said. "Your researcher has committed an act that could end our alliance." The cub chose that moment to make another soft chirping sound. It was still wrapped around Sarah's arm, and now it seemed to be getting sleepy. Its eyes were half closed, and the frantic light patterns had slowed. One of the Vryn medics stepped forward with what looked like a scanning device. After a moment, the medic spoke in a hushed tone. "Juvenile's life signs are unstable, but not critical yet, and the human appears unharmed. Get her into isolation," the lead Vryn ordered. "We will convene an emergency council, and if the juvenile dies, there will be consequences." 2 human security officers stepped forward to escort Sarah. She looked down at the cub one more time. It had finally loosened its grip on her sleeve, and a Vryn medic carefully lifted it away. The little creature made a sad sound as it was separated from her. Sarah was led into the ship, and the airlock sealed behind her. Through the window she could see the Vryn medics surrounding the cub. She could see her team arguing with the Vryn officials. She could see everything falling apart. Her wristcam was removed by a technician who gave her a sympathetic look. "They'll review the footage," he said. "Maybe it will help." Sarah nodded, but she didn't feel hopeful. She had broken the most important rule of first contact. She had touched a Vryn juvenile. And now she might have started an interstellar incident that could destroy everything humanity had worked for on this world. The isolation chamber door closed, and Sarah was alone, with nothing but her thoughts and the memory of those desperate little paws clinging to her sleeve. The isolation chamber was small and sterile, and Sarah had been staring at the same white walls for 8 hours. Medical scans had shown she was perfectly healthy. No toxins, no unknown pathogens, and no sign that the cub had hurt her in any way. But the Vryn weren't worried about her health. They were worried about what she had done to the cub. Through the clear panel in her door, Sarah could see her team working frantically in the lab beyond. Dr. Martinez was reviewing something on a large display screen, while other researchers crowded around him. Sarah pressed her hand against the panel and wished she could hear what they were saying. Finally, the door hissed open, and Martinez stepped inside, carrying a tablet. His face was grim. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked. "Bad," Martinez said. The Vryn diplomatic corps is threatening to expel all humans from the planet, and the council is meeting in 6 hours to decide our fate. Felt her stomach drop. What about the cub? In critical care, Martinez said. The Vryn medics say it's been contaminated by your contact, and they're trying to reverse the damage. Damage? Sarah repeated. Martinez, I didn't hurt it, and I swear the cub came to me. I know. Martinez pulled up a video file on his tablet. I've been watching your wristcam footage for the last 3 hours. He turned the screen toward her, and Sarah saw herself from the camera's perspective. She watched the cub emerge from the undergrowth and approach her. She watched herself backing away, following protocol. She watched the stumble and her instinctive reach. Then she watched the cub grab onto her sleeve. They're calling this an attack, Martinez said. The Vryn analysis team says the cub was in distress and trying to escape from you. That's not what it looks like to me, Sarah said. She had watched the moment replay in her mind 100 times already. In Sarah's mind. Show me the footage again, but slow it down. Martinez brought up the video and reduced the playback speed. Sarah leaned close to the tablet screen. There, she said, pointing. Look at the cub's fur patterns. The bioluminescent display on the cub's body pulsed in rapid sequences of blue, yellow, and green. According to the Vryn database, those colors mean joy, distress, Martinez said, which supports their theory that it was panicking. Or, Sarah said slowly, what if we're reading it wrong, and what if joy-distress doesn't mean what we think it means? Martinez looked at her with interest. Keep going. The Vryn gave us their cultural database, but they're not like us, Sarah said. Their emotional categories might not match ours, and what if joy-distress means something more like excited need or happy urgent? She pointed at the screen again. Look at how the cub moves, and it's not trying to escape, and every time I shift, it adjusts to stay pressed against my sleeve. Martinez watched the footage again, and Sarah could see his mind working. The scratching motion, he said. You're right, and it's rhythmic, and almost like it's trying to burrow, Sarah finished. Like it's trying to get closer, not get away. They watched in silence as the cub wrapped itself tighter around Sarah's arm. There's something else, Martinez said. He pulled up a different data stream. This is the thermal imaging from your wrist cam. The screen showed the scene in heat signatures. Sarah appeared as a bright orange and red figure. The glowing forest registered as cool blues and purples. And the cub was dark blue when it first appeared. Its temperature was dropping, Sarah said. Rapidly, Martinez confirmed. By the time it reached you, the cub was hypothermic. Sarah's mind raced, and when it grabbed onto me, Martinez advanced the thermal footage, frame by frame. The moment the cub made contact with Sarah's sleeve, its color began to shift, from dark blue to lighter blue to green to yellow. Its temperature stabilized, Martinez said. Within 30 seconds of contact, it had warmed to normal ranges. Sarah looked up at him with wide eyes. It wasn't attacking me. No. It was cold. Yes. They stared at each other as the implications sank in. Humans are warm-blooded, Sarah said. Our body temperature stays constant around 37 degrees Celsius, and we radiate heat. And the Vryn are crystalline, Martinez added. Their bodies don't generate heat the same way, and I need to check something. He pulled up the Vryn cultural database and started searching. Sarah watched over his shoulder as he navigated through files about Vryn biology and reproduction. Here, Martinez stopped, on a page about juvenile development. Quickly. Vryn cubs went through several developmental stages. The first stage, called the thermal crisis period, lasted approximately 6 weeks after emergence. During this time, cubs could not regulate their own body temperature. 70% mortality rate, Sarah read aloud, accepted as natural and unavoidable. Natural, Martinez said bitterly, because they don't have a way to keep their cubs warm. Their bodies are too rigid, Sarah said, remembering her training. Adult Vryn could shatter a cub if they tried to hold it close. She kept reading. Physical contact between adult Vryn and cubs was strictly forbidden. Cubs were kept in special chambers with artificial heating, but the technology was imperfect. Most cubs died in their sleep when their body temperature dropped too low. This is horrible, Sarah whispered. And preventable, Martinez said, if they had access to a reliable heat source, like a human. Sarah thought about the desperate way the cub had clung to her sleeve. The little creature hadn't been attacking. It had been trying to survive. We need to tell them, Sarah said. I've been trying, Martinez said. The Vryn won't listen, and they're convinced you've poisoned or contaminated the cubs somehow. What if we could prove it? How? Sarah gestured to the tablet. The wristcam footage and the thermal data and the timing of everything, and we can show them exactly what happened. Martinez looked skeptical. The Vryn Council isn't exactly in a mood to listen to human explanations right now. Then we make them listen, Sarah said. Martinez, this could change everything for them, and if we're right, their species has been losing 70% of their children for generations because they didn't know that simple warmth could save them. And if we're wrong? Firmly. I felt it, and that cub was freezing, and the moment it touched me, it calmed down. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll request an emergency meeting with the council, and I'll tell them you have critical information about what happened. They won't want to hear from me. Probably not, Martinez agreed, but I'll make them understand that this isn't about assigning blame anymore, and this is about saving their cubs. He stood to leave, but Sarah stopped him. Martinez, wait, and what about the cub I touched, and is it okay? His expression softened. Last update said it was in critical condition again, and temperature dropping, and the Vryn medical technology isn't working. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest. That little creature had been so scared and so cold. If they won't listen, she said quietly, that cub is going to die. I know, Martinez said, which is why we have to convince. After he left, Sarah paced the small isolation chamber. She thought about the cub's tiny paws gripping her sleeve. She thought about the way its bioluminescent fur had flashed with what she now understood was desperate need. She thought about an entire species losing their children and accepting it as unavoidable tragedy. Her people had come to the stars, looking for knowledge and for alliance. Maybe they had found something more important. Maybe they had found a way to save lives. The door panel lit up with an incoming message. Sarah pressed the button. Council has agreed to hear your testimony, Martinez's voice said. You have one chance to explain, and Sarah, make it count. Sarah looked down at her sleeve where the cub had clung so desperately. I will, she said. Outside her chamber, she could hear the research station coming alive with urgent activity. In a few hours, she would stand before the Vryn Council. P. She would tell them what she had discovered. And maybe, just maybe, she could help them see that what had happened in that glowing forest wasn't a catastrophe. It was hope. The Vryn Grand Council chamber made Sarah feel impossibly small. The walls were made entirely of crystal that reached up into a dome ceiling hundreds of feet above. Light refracted through every surface, creating rainbows that danced across the assembled Vryn elders. There were 50 of them, arranged in a circular formation. Each elder sat on a raised platform of carved crystal. Their bodies gleamed with internal light, and their eyes fixed on Sarah with expressions she couldn't read. She stood in the center of the circle, alone. Martinez and the rest of her team had been forbidden from entering. This was between Sarah and the Vryn. Dr. Sarah Chen, the eldest Vryn, spoke, and her voice echoed through the chamber. You stand accused of contaminating a juvenile of our species and violating our most sacred protocols. Sarah's mouth was dry, but she kept her voice steady. I understand the severity of what happened, and I take full responsibility for the contact. Then you admit your guilt. I admit that I made physical contact with the cub, Sarah said. But I don't believe I contaminated it, and I believe I saved its life. A ripple of sound moved through the council. Crystalline bodies chimed against stone platforms. Explain yourself, human, another elder said. Sarah took a breath. May I show you the footage from my wristcam? There was a long pause. Then the eldest elder gestured with a delicate limb. You may proceed. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. Sarah pulled up the video file from the tablet Martinez had given her. This is what happened from the moment I first encountered the juvenile. The footage began to play. Sarah watched the council members lean forward as they saw the cub emerge from the undergrowth. I was following protocol, Sarah narrated. I backed away and maintained distance, but the juvenile kept approaching. The video showed her stumbling and the cub rushing forward. I didn't reach for the juvenile, Sarah said. I reached to catch it when it was falling, and my instinct was to prevent harm. Your instinct caused harm, an elder said sharply. The juvenile has been in critical condition since your contact. I don't think the contact caused the critical condition, Sarah said. I think the juvenile was already dying. She switched to the thermal imaging. The council chamber went silent as they watched the heat signature footage. This shows temperature, Sarah explained. The bright colors are warm, and the dark colors are cold. She pointed to her own orange-red figure. Humans maintain a constant body temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius, and we're endothermic, meaning we generate our own heat. Then she pointed to the dark blue shape of the cub. The juvenile's temperature, when it approached me, was critically low, and it was hypothermic. The footage showed the moment of contact. Frame by frame, the cub's color shifted from blue to green to yellow. Within 30 seconds of touching my sleeve, the juvenile's temperature normalized, Sarah said. It wasn't trying to escape from me, and it was trying to get warm. One of the younger elders spoke up. Our medical technology maintains the nursery chambers at optimal temperature, and this should not have happened. What is the survival rate for cubs in the thermal crisis period? Sarah asked. The chamber went very quiet. That information is not relevant to, an elder began. 70% mortality, Sarah said, according to your own database, and I looked it up. She turned slowly, trying to make eye contact with as many council members as possible. You lose 7 out of every 10 cubs during their first 6 weeks, Sarah continued. Your database says this is natural and unavoidable, but what if it's not? You presume to lecture us about our own young, the eldest said, and her voice was cold. I presume to offer you what my species learned millions of years ago, Sarah said. Warmth keeps babies alive. She pulled up another data file. Humans are mammals, and we're warm-blooded, and when our babies are born, they can't regulate their temperature either. Images appeared in the hologram. Human mothers holding infants against their skin. Fathers cradling newborns. Families wrapped in blankets together. We keep them warm with our bodies, Sarah said. Skin-to-skin contact, and it's called kangaroo care, and it saves lives. She switched back to the wristcam footage. That's what the cub was doing on my sleeve, and it was seeking warmth because it was dying, and my body heat was the only thing that could save it. Impossible, an elder said. We have tried every method to save our cubs during the thermal crisis, and nothing prevents the mortality rate. Have you tried holding them? Sarah asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Finally, the eldest elder spoke. Our bodies are crystalline and rigid, and if an adult Vrin attempts to hold a juvenile, the pressure would shatter the cub's fragile form. I know, Sarah said gently. Your bodies are beautiful, but they're not designed to be heat sources or soft enough to cradle a baby. She paused. But human bodies are. Another elder stood, and her crystalline form trembled. What are you suggesting, human? I'm suggesting that the cub came to me because on some instinctive level it knew I could provide what it needed, Sarah said, warmth and safety and a soft place to rest. This is speculation. Then let me prove it, Sarah said. The cub I made contact with is in critical condition right now because its temperature is dropping again, and your technology can't replicate what I accidentally provided. She looked directly at the eldest elder. Let me try to save it. The council erupted in voices. Some elders spoke in anger, others in confusion, a few in what sounded like desperate hope. The eldest raised a limb, and silence fell. You ask us to allow further contamination of the juvenile. I ask you to let me keep it warm, Sarah said. If I'm wrong, the cub will die anyway, and if I'm right, you might learn something that could save every cub born from this day forward. An elder at the far side of the circle spoke for the first time. Her voice was ancient and sad. There are records in our oldest archives, she said. Before the great cataclysm that reshaped our world, there existed another species alongside ours. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. They were called the warm shepherds in our tongue, the ancient elder continued. They had soft bodies that radiated heat, and they helped raise our young through the thermal crisis period. Other elders turned to stare at her. Those are myths, one said. Are they? The ancient elder asked. Or did we simply forget when the war shepherds died in the planetary fires 10,000 years ago? She looked at Sarah. Perhaps the universe has returned to us what we lost. The eldest elder was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. Dr. Chen, the juvenile you encountered is named Ember in your language, and Ember is dying because we cannot provide adequate thermal regulation. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Let me help. If we allow this, and if the juvenile dies in your care, the alliance between our peoples will end. I understand. And if the juvenile survives, the eldest elder's internal light pulsed brightly. If the juvenile survives, you will have given us back something we thought lost forever. She made a gesture that Sarah had learned meant formal acknowledgement. The council grants permission for Dr. Sarah Chen to attempt thermal regulation of the juvenile Ember under medical supervision. Sarah bowed her head in respect. Thank you. Do not thank us yet, the eldest said. You have claimed you can save our young, and now you must prove it. Two Vrin guards approached Sarah. You will be escorted to the medical sanctuary, one said. No human has been permitted in this place before. Sarah followed them from the chamber. Behind her she could hear the council members talking in hushed, urgent tones. Some still sounded angry, but others sounded like they were allowing themselves to hope. The walk through Vrin territory revealed architecture Sarah had never seen. Buildings made of living crystal that grew from the ground. Gardens where bioluminescent plants created patterns like galaxies. And everywhere she looked, Vrin adults stopped and stared at the human being escorted to their most sacred place. The medical sanctuary was a dome of pale blue crystal. Inside, the air was warm and humid. Incubation chambers lined the walls, and inside each one, Sarah could see a tiny cub. Most were sleeping peacefully, but some were still and dark, already lost. In the center of the sanctuary, on a platform of soft, luminescent moss, lay Ember. The little cub's fur barely glowed. Its breathing was shallow. A Vrin medic stood nearby, monitoring readings on a crystalline display. The juvenile's temperature is dropping below critical levels, the medic said. We estimate less than 1 hour before system failure. Sarah approached slowly. May I? The medic stepped back. Sarah knelt beside Ember and carefully slid her hands under the small body. The cub was so cold. She lifted Ember gently and tucked the tiny creature against her chest. Then she wrapped her jacket around them both. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ember made a soft sound. The cub's eyes opened and focused on Sarah's face. Its fur began to glow brighter, warmer. The bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors Sarah recognized from the database. Joy. Pure, simple joy. Sarah felt the little body relax against her warmth. "Hey there, Ember," she whispered. "I've got you." The Vryn medic made a sound of amazement. "The temperature is rising and stabilizing, and this is impossible." "No," Sarah said softly, stroking Ember's glowing fur. "This is what was always supposed to happen." And she held the cub close, while its tiny heart beat steady and strong against hers. Sarah had been holding Ember for 48 hours, with only brief breaks for necessary functions. The medical sanctuary had become her entire world. She sat in a specially designed chair that allowed her to rest while keeping the cub warm against her chest. Ember slept peacefully, and the little body rose and fell with steady breaths. The transformation had been remarkable. Within hours of that first contact, Ember's bioluminescent fur had returned to full brightness. The cub's temperature remained stable as long as Sarah held it close. When she had to set Ember down for a few minutes, the temperature would begin to drop. Not as dramatically as before, but enough to show the cub still needed warmth. Dr. Martinez had brought the entire research team to witness. They took notes and recorded data, and discussed the implications in hushed voices. But it was the Vryn who truly understood what this meant. Word had spread through their community like fire. On the second day, a Vryn parent appeared at the sanctuary entrance. She carried a cub that was barely glowing. "Please," the parent said, and her voice was breaking. "My child is in thermal crisis, and the chambers are not enough." Sarah looked at Martinez. He nodded. "We can try." The parent approached carefully and placed her cub on the moss beside Ember. Sarah gently picked up the new cub and settled it on her other side. The tiny creature made a soft chirping sound and burrowed against her warmth. Within minutes, its glow strengthened. The Vryn parent made a sound Sarah had never heard before. It was something between a sob and a song. "My child lives," the parent whispered. "My child lives." More parents came. By the end of the day, Sarah was coordinating a schedule with Martinez and her team members. Each human would take shifts holding cubs, transformed into something unprecedented. Humans and Vryn working side by side. Cubs being passed carefully from warming arms to monitoring stations and back again. The survival rate changed overnight. Where 7 out of 10 cubs died, now 9 out of 10 lived. The change rippled through Vryn society like shockwaves. Sarah watched as parents who had accepted loss as inevitable began to hope. She saw cubs who would have died grow strong and playful. Ember became the symbol of it all, the first cub saved by human warmth. The little creature followed Sarah everywhere when awake. Its bioluminescent patterns had developed a unique signature that the Vryn said matched Sarah's own energy. They were bonded in a way that transcended species. But not everyone celebrated. 3 weeks into the warming program, Sarah noticed the tension. Some of the older Vryn who came to observe had expressions of disapproval, watched humans holding cubs, and their internal lights flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as anger. Martinez pulled her aside one evening. "We're getting reports of protests in the outer territories," he said quietly. "Protests against saving cubs. Protests against what they're calling species contamination," Martinez said. "There's a faction that believes we're making the Vryn dependent on humans." Sarah looked at Ember, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "We're keeping their children alive." "I know, but some Vryn see it differently, and they think this makes their species weak, and they're saying that natural selection should determine which cubs survive." "Natural selection," Sarah said angrily. "There's nothing natural about letting babies freeze to death when there's a simple solution." "I agree," Martinez said, "but we need to be careful, and the conservative faction is gaining support." The first real sign of trouble came. 4 days later, Sarah arrived at the medical sanctuary to find 3 Vryn elders she didn't recognize standing at the entrance. Dr. Chen, one of them said, the council has requested that you limit your contact with the juveniles. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Why? There are concerns about long-term effects of cross-species bonding. The only long-term effect is that cubs survive, Sarah said. You make our species dependent, another elder said. What happens when you humans leave this world and our cubs cannot survive without you? It was a fair question. Sarah had been thinking about it herself. Then we work together to find a solution that doesn't require our constant presence, she said. But we don't stop saving lives while we figure it out. The elders exchanged looks. The conservative faction has demanded a halt to the warming program. No, Sarah said firmly, I won't stop, and neither will my team. May not have a choice. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She held Ember and thought about all the cubs who had survived because humans had been there to keep them warm. She thought about the parents, who no longer had to accept that most of their children would die. She thought about the conservative faction, who valued tradition over life. Martinez found her in the sanctuary at dawn. His face was grim. What happened? Sarah asked. The conservatives have taken action, he said. They've stolen 4 cubs from the warming program, including 2 who were bonded to human caregivers. Sarah stood up carefully, holding Ember close. Stolen them where? We don't know, but they left a message, and they said they're returning the cubs to the old ways, and they're going to let nature decide which ones are strong enough to survive. Sarah felt cold rage building in her chest. They're going to let them freeze to death, to prove a point. That's what it sounds like. We have to find them. Sarah, we don't even know where to start looking, and the Vryn authorities are saying this is an internal matter. Internal matter, Sarah looked down at Ember. These are children, and I don't care what species they are, or what political statement someone is trying to make. She handed Ember to Martinez. Keep the little one warm, and I'm going after them. Sarah, you can't just— Yes, I can, she said. I have 48 hours of thermal imaging data from my Wristcam, and each cub has a unique heat signature. And if they're alive, I can track them. Martinez stared at her. That's actually brilliant, but you'll need help. Get me a team, Sarah said, and get me every piece of scanning equipment we have. Within 2 hours, Sarah had assembled a rescue team, 3 humans including herself, 2 Vryn who disagreed with the conservative faction, technology to scan for thermal signatures across a wide range. The Vryn who joined them were young. One was the parent whose cubs Sarah had saved on that second day. My child lives because of you, the parent said. I will not allow others to die for ideology. They started at the medical sanctuary and used Sarah's Wristcam data to identify the unique thermal signatures of the 4 missing cubs. Then they began searching. The planet was vast, but Sarah had a theory. The conservatives talk about the old ways, she said. Where would they have taken cubs in ancient times? One of the Vryn guides spoke up. The proving grounds, in the deep crystalline canyons, and it is where our ancestors left cubs to demonstrate natural strength. How do we get there? It is forbidden territory, but I know the path. They traveled for 6 hours through increasingly hostile terrain. The temperature dropped as they descended into canyon. Systems. Sarah's scanner picked up faint signals. I'm getting readings, she said. 4 distinct thermal signatures, but they're weak. Weak means dying, Martinez said grimly. They moved faster. The canyons were beautiful and terrible. Walls of pure crystal rose hundreds of feet on either side. The ground was covered in frost. It was the coldest place Sarah had encountered on this world. And it was exactly the wrong place for baby cubs who couldn't regulate their temperature. They found the conservatives in a natural amphitheater of crystal. 5 older Vryn stood in a circle around 4 tiny cubs placed on pedestals of ice. The cubs were barely moving. Their bioluminescent fur had gone dark. Stop, Sarah shouted. The conservatives turned. Their leader was an ancient Vryn whose crystalline body was etched with age. The human who contaminates our young, the leader said, you are not welcome. I'm not leaving without those cubs, Sarah said. She started forward, but two of the conservatives blocked her path. These juveniles will prove their worth through natural trial, the leader said, as our species has done for millennia. Your species has been dying for millennia, Sarah shot back. 70% mortality isn't natural selection, and it's tragedy. It is the way. It's the way to extinction. Sarah looked at the cubs. One of them moved weakly. It made a sound that broke her heart. Please, she said, you've made your point and you don't agree with the warming program, and I understand, but these cubs are innocent, and they don't deserve to die for your ideology. They deserve the chance to prove their strength. They're babies, Sarah said. They don't need to prove anything, and they need warmth and safety and a chance to grow. The conservative leader's light pulsed. You make us weak, human. You make us dependent. And what happens when your species leaves and our cubs cannot survive without you? It was the same question the elders had asked. But this time, Sarah had an answer. Then we make sure they can, she said. She pulled a small device from her pack. It was a prototype her engineering team had been developing. This is a biothermal fabric, she said. It mimics human body heat, using technology both our species can manufacture. She activated the device. It began to glow with gentle warmth. We're not trying to make you dependent, Sarah continued. We're trying to give you back what you lost, and then we teach you how to maintain it yourself. She looked at each conservative and turned. We're not your enemy, and we're not trying to replace Vryn parents, and we're trying to help you save your own children. The leader was silent. One of the cubs made another weak sound. Sarah's Vryn ally stepped. Elder, I am a parent whose child was saved by this human, she said. My cub is strong and healthy because Dr. Chen kept it warm through the thermal crisis, and now my cub bonds with me and plays and grows. She gestured to the dying cubs. These juveniles do not prove strength by freezing, and they prove only that we have failed them. The ancient leader looked at the cubs, then at the warming device in Sarah's hand, then at Sarah's face. If we accept your help, we admit weakness, it declared. No, Sarah said gently. You admit that no species has all the answers, and you admit that sometimes the answer comes from an unexpected place. She held out the warming fabric. Let me save them, and then let me teach you how to save them yourselves. The moments stretched. Finally the leader stepped aside. Take the juveniles, the ancient Vryn said. Save them if you can. Sarah ran to the first cub. It was so cold, wrapped it in the warming fabric, and held it close to her own body. Martinez and the other humans grabbed the remaining cubs. They worked quickly, wrapping the tiny bodies in warmth. Sarah felt the cub in her arms stir. Its eyes opened. Its fur began to glow faintly. Come on, little one, she whispered. Come back. The cub made a soft chirp, then another. Sarah looked at the conservative leader. Watch, she said. She carefully transferred the cub to the biothermal wrap and showed the ancient Vryn how to hold it properly. Your species can do this, Sarah said. You just needed to know it was possible. The leader's crystalline form trembled as the cub settled into the warmth. It lives, Sarah confirmed, and so will countless others if you let us help. The ancient Vryn looked at Sarah with something new in those alien eyes. Understanding. Sarah sat in the medical sanctuary 3 months after rescuing the cubs from the deep crystalline canyons. Everything had changed. The warming program was no longer controversial. It was standard practice. Every Vryn cub born on the planet now had access to either human volunteers or the biothermal wraps that Sarah's team had perfected. The mortality rate had dropped from 70% to 11%. And that 11% was mostly cubs with other medical complications. Not simple hypothermia. Sarah watched as a Vryn parent carefully wrapped a newborn cub in one of the thermal fabrics. The parent's movements were uncertain at first, but then the cub chirped happily, and the parent's internal light pulsed with joy. You're doing great, Sarah encouraged. The parent looked at her. I never thought I would hold my own child, the parent said. For generations we accepted that most cubs would die, and now I hold my own daughter, and she is warm." Sarah smiled. "You're giving her what she needs, and that's what parents do." Ember chose that moment to scamper across the sanctuary floor. The cub was 4 months old now, and full of energy. Its bioluminescent patterns were unique among all Vryn, bright blues and greens that pulsed with curiosity. Ember climbed up onto Sarah's lap and settled there with a contented purr. "Someone's feeling affectionate today," Sarah said. She stroked the soft fur, and Ember's color shifted to warm gold, the pattern that meant love. Martinez entered the sanctuary, carrying a datapad. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Try me, and I've seen a lot of unbelievable things lately." "The Vryn Council wants to establish a permanent cultural exchange program," Martinez said. "They're proposing that human families can come live on Kepler 442b and help raise cubs, and in return, Vryn families will visit Earth to teach us about their technology and culture." Sarah felt her breath catch. "That's incredible." "It gets better," Martinez continued. "They want to call it the Warm Shepherds Initiative, after the species from their ancient history." Sarah looked around the sanctuary, at the cubs sleeping peacefully in their warming wraps, at the Vryn parents learning to care for their young in ways their species had forgotten, at the humans and Vryn working side by side. "We didn't just save their cubs," she said quietly. "We helped them remember who they used to be, and who they can be again." Martinez agreed. He sat down beside her. "The Wristcam footage has been viewed over 10 billion times across human and Vryn networks, and people are calling it the most important first contact moment in history." Sarah laughed. "All because a cold cub grabbed my sleeve. All because you followed your instinct to help." Sleepy sound, and shifted to a more comfortable position on Sarah's lap. "What's going to happen to Ember?" Martinez asked. It was the question Sarah had been avoiding. "The Vryn say Ember is bonded to me now," she said. "In their culture, that means Ember is my responsibility until old enough to be independent. And how do you feel about that?" Sarah looked down at the sleeping cub. She thought about that moment in the glowing forest when Ember had desperately climbed onto her sleeve. She thought about holding the tiny freezing body against her chest. She thought about watching Ember grow stronger and brighter every day. "I feel like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. The sanctuary doors opened, and the ancient conservative leader entered. Sarah tensed. Relations with the conservative faction had improved, but they were still wary. The elder approached slowly. "Dr. Chen, may I speak with you?" The ancient Vryn settled onto a meditation platform nearby. "I came to apologize," the elder said. Sarah's eyes widened. Apologies were rare in Vryn culture. They were considered sacred. "You don't need to," Sarah began. "I do," the elder interrupted. "I allowed ideology to blind me to truth, and I put juveniles at risk because I feared change and I feared dependence." The elder's crystalline form caught the light. "But I understand now what you tried to tell me in the canyons." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "Accepting help is not weakness," the elder said. "It is wisdom, and your species offered us a gift, and instead of gratitude, we offered suspicion." "You were protecting your culture," Sarah said gently. "I understand that." "Our culture was dying," the elder replied. "We lost 7 of every 10 cubs, and we called it natural, and we called it inevitable. And we were wrong." The ancient Vryn gestured to the sanctuary. "Have now. And look at the cubs who live because we accepted help. And this is not weakness, and this is strength." Sarah felt emotion tightening her throat. "You're giving them a chance," she said. "That's all any species can do for their young. And you gave us the knowledge to do so." The elder reached into a fold of crystalline body structure and withdrew something. It was a small device that glowed with soft internal light. "This is a memory crystal," the elder explained. "It contains our most sacred histories, and the stories of the warm shepherds who helped our ancestors raise cubs 10,000 years ago." The elder offered the crystal to Sarah. "We thought those stories were myths, but you proved they were memories, and you proved that the bond between species can transcend time and distance. Sarah accepted the crystal carefully. Thank you. No, Dr. Chen, thank you. And you returned to us what we lost. And now we can move. After the elder left, Sarah sat quietly with the memory crystal in one hand and Ember in the other. Martinez had left her alone, knowing she needed time to process. She activated the crystal. Images filled the air around her, ancient Vrin history unfolding in holographic form. She saw a species that looked similar to humans, but not quite. Covered in fur, with large, gentle eyes. The warm shepherds. She saw them living alongside the Vrin, holding cubs, keeping them safe through the thermal crisis period. She saw a civilization built on cooperation. Then she saw the disaster. Massive planetary fires, the warm shepherds dying, the Vrin surviving but alone. And she saw generations of Vrin cubs dying, 7 out of 10 lost, because the warm shepherds were gone, and the Vrin didn't know how to save them. The knowledge had been lost to tragedy and time. Until now, Wristcam suddenly activated. Incoming message. She accepted it, and her supervisor, Dr. Helena Park, appeared. Sarah, we have news from Earth. Good news, I hope. The best, Dr. Park said. The Galactic Council has reviewed the situation on Kepler 442b, and they're creating a new framework for interspecies cooperation, and it's called the Warmth Accord. What does that mean? It means that what you started here is going to expand across known space, Dr. Park explained. Any species that needs help with their young can request assistance, and any species that can provide that help will be trained and supported. Sarah felt dizzy. That's incredible. The Accord is being named after you, Dr. Park continued. The Chen Protocol for Cross-Species Child Welfare. I don't need it named after me. Too late, Dr. Park smiled. Your wristcam footage changed everything, Sarah, and people across 100 worlds watched that cub climb onto your sleeve, and they watched you save its life, and now they're asking what else is possible when species help each other. After the call ended, Sarah sat in silence. Ember woke up and looked at her with those large, luminescent eyes. Did you hear that, little one? Sarah whispered. We changed the galaxy. Ember chirped and climbed up to Sarah's shoulder, the cub's favorite perch. Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the glowing forest where this had all begun. She could see Vrin and humans walking together. She could see cubs playing safely under the watchful eyes of both species. 3 months ago, she had been a researcher following protocols. Now she was part of something bigger. A bridge between species, a keeper of warmth, a warm shepherd. Her wristcam recorded everything as it always did. But now Sarah understood that some moments were bigger than the people living them. Moments rippled out across time and space. Some moments changed everything. She thought about the title of the report that would be filed. Cub went wild on her sleeve. She caught it on wristcam. It sounded like a simple incident report, but it was the beginning of a new era. Sarah's team had started producing biothermal wraps on a massive scale. The designs were open source, shared freely with any species that needed them. Vrin engineers had already improved the technology, made it more efficient, more accessible. Within a year, they projected that every cub born in Vrin space would have access to proper thermal regulation. Within 5 years, the technology would spread to other species with similar needs. Sarah had started a revolution with nothing but compassion and body heat. Ember purred against her neck. Ready to go home, little one? Sarah asked. Home was a small dwelling near the sanctuary. Sarah had decided to stay on Kepler 442b indefinitely. Earth would always be there. But Ember needed her. The warming program needed her. And honestly, Sarah needed them too. She had found her purpose in the most unexpected place. As she walked through the sanctuary for the evening, She stopped to check on each cub. Some were sleeping peacefully in their warming wraps. Others were being held by human volunteers or Vrin parents learning the new techniques. Every single one of them would survive the thermal crisis period. Every single one would grow strong. Sarah thought about the 70% who had died before. All the potential lost, all the lives cut short. Never again, not if she could help it, not if the warmth of compassion could spread as far as the light of stars. Outside the sanctuary, night was falling. The bioluminescent forest came alive with light, pulsed in rhythm with the glowing trees. "It's beautiful," Sarah said. And it was. Not just the forest, but everything. The cooperation between species, the cubs who would live, the future they were building together. Her wristcam caught it all. Every moment preserved. Every interaction documented. Someday people would watch this footage and understand what happened here. They would see that first contact wasn't just about discovering aliens. It was about discovering how to care for each other across the vast differences that separated them. They would see that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or weapons or conquest. It was the simple instinct to reach out when someone was falling, to offer warmth when someone was cold, to help when help was needed. Sarah returned to her dwelling and settled Ember into a soft nest. The cub yawned, and its bioluminescence dimmed to a soft, nighttime glow. "Sleep well, little one," Sarah whispered. She pulled up her wristcam footage, found the moment from 3 months ago, watched as a tiny freezing cub grabbed desperately onto her sleeve, watched as she made the choice to help instead of following protocol, watched as everything changed. The footage had been viewed billions of times, but for Sarah, it would always be personal. This was the moment her life found meaning. This was the moment she became a warm shepherd. This was the moment that proved kindness could change the galaxy. She saved the file with a simple title, "The Day We Learned to Share Warmth." Then she turned off the display and sat in the gentle glow of Ember's sleeping form. Tomorrow there would be more cubs to save, more parents to teach, more bridges to build between species. But tonight she simply sat with a sleeping cub and felt grateful. Instinct that overrode training. Grateful for warmth that could be shared. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings. Outside the window, the stars shone bright. Somewhere out there, other species were watching the footage, wondering what they could learn, wondering what help they could offer or receive. A warmth accord was spreading, and it had all started with one cold cub and one human who couldn't ignore a creature in need. Sarah smiled, closed her eyes, and let herself drift toward sleep with Ember purring softly beside her. The wristcam had caught everything, but the real story wasn't in the footage. It was in the warmth they shared, and in the countless lives they had saved, and in the future they were building together. One cub at a time, one act of compassion at a time, one shared moment of warmth at a time. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how it should be.